Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday's TLD cast. I'm your guest host today, Cara North, and I'm joined in the boxes with the fabulous Eric Rowland. And what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into lifelong learning. And if this is your first time to TLDC, welcome. We are the training, learning, and development community. We're a community of folks who love to learn and love to talk with one another. So if you would like to join us, you can do that by joining our Slack channel, which is, I just put there in the chat, tldchat.us. Get you to our Slack channel, and Luis Malbus, the founder of TLDC, has put a lot of sweat equity into our new website. So check out our new website too at the tldc.com. Hello, Mr. Joe Wyndham. Fabulous to see you as always. And we just welcome everybody today. Today's topic's really important. I have thought for a while, since everything going on with this pandemic, that this is our time, our learning and development time in the sun for a lot of us. And I think there's a lot of great opportunity to be had with what's going on right now. So we're going to be talking through kind of the ATD capability model, specifically that lifelong learning bucket that's in there. And Eric's going to guide us through the conversation, and we'd love to have you. So this is going to be a facilitated conversation. If someone feels super passionate about the topics today, please let me know in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring it. We'd love to have you join us in the boxes today. And let's just have a conversation about how we can lift each other up and keep growing ourselves, because I think that we're kind of like the mechanics, right? So usually the mechanics have the crummiest cars. We need to take that kind of same advice, and we need to look at ourselves when we're looking to grow. So with that, Eric, it has been a hot minute since we've chatted. I think our last TLD cast was the Ask a Millennial Anything, and I think Mel Milloway was part of that with us too. So do you want to take a moment and just introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. I'm Eric Rowland. I am a learning advisor for Paychex. At the end of this month, I'll be there for 2 years. Prior to that, I was an e-learning specialist for an organization. And then before that, I was actually a teacher. I taught social studies or history down in Florida. I'm actually in Rochester, New York now. But yeah, I've been involved in L&D now for, when you count education, 5-6 years. I love it. And I think this is, I'm very passionate about this. And I wanted to kind of, a couple months ago, I brought this topic up of lifelong learning to Cara, and I said, hey, let's have a conversation about this. I think this is really important. And I think there's a lot of people who work for many different organizations that do this differently. And I think we could really all learn from that and kind of steal from others and, develop some really good best practices. And I hope that we have a good discussion today. I look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Yeah, I love it. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. And again, Eric was definitely the one that drove this topic, and I was thrilled. I was like, let's do it. This sounds great. So Eric has asked for me to share the ATD capability model, specifically the building personal capacity capability, rather, piece of it. Do you want to talk a little bit about this? And then I can share the link here with folks that want to follow along.
Yeah. I'll pull it up here too. So yeah, the capability model, I think this provides a good framework, not only for our conversation today, but just kind of how organizations, can kind of check as this is kind of built into their culture. And so I kind of like how you kind of have the knowledge and skill statements down here. There we go. And so when we look at this, a lot of it has to, again, do with the knowledge and the desire. And so what I love about this conversation is that we're all learning professionals. And so I don't, I believe, I wouldn't believe if anyone said that they weren't passionate about learning in our space. Like, we're all passionate about learning. I think every single one of us joining this conversation today would classify as lifelong learners. And it's something that we're trying to, how to, put it out into other parts of the organization. How do we have, our service members, our sales members, different business units? How do we bring that passion and that fire to them and build structures within our organization that nurture that growth? So if we look at the capability model here, the 4 knowledge and skill statements, knowledge of how to desire to learn and can lead to the expansion and development of knowledge and skills over time, resources for career exploration, lifelong learning for self and others, skill in acquiring new knowledge through professional development activities, and developing, maintaining, and leveraging networks across the range of people. Again, this is something that, as L&D folks, we're quite we live this every single day. And so I really was hoping to kind of have a conversation of how do organizations leverage this if they haven't built it, and this learning, kind of lifelong learning culture, what can we do to stimulate that? So I have a bunch of different questions I kind of want to just toss out there. And then I know you have your higher ed experience, and I would love to see, from a professional private industry and then higher ed standpoint, what are some comparisons? What can we learn from each other? What are some takeaways? So.
Awesome. Let's get to it. Go ahead and roll that first question. Let's get it going.
Sure. So one of the things I love about culture, just in general, people have different cultures, is really, with lifelong learning and as part of the culture, like, how do we know when it's established? Like, how do we know? It's often felt, one of those things. It's like you can feel it, and when I posed and really kind of to give people a little bit more background before we dive in, what made I think you were doing a presentation about this new capability with Jonathan Rock, and I posed a question to the chat. I said, what does lifelong learning look like in your organization? And so many people said, well, they provide, continuing education credits or college credits or something if you want to, pursue higher ed. And I said, well, those are just basic benefits at this point. I mean, a lot of organizations have, college credits or some college tuition assistance or something of that nature. And then a lot of people are also commenting that this benefit is actually the least likely to be taken as well. So how can you say that this culture that you have is not really enacted, and then it's really just a list of a couple of different benefits? So how do we know when we've established that culture? And so that's where I kind of posed the question, like, let's talk about lifelong learning and what does that look like? Like, what can we touch it? Can we feel it? How do we know we've achieved it in that organization? So give a little background there. So that's kind of my first question. I mean, if people want to hop in and kind of talk about it, I can talk about it from my organization's perspective. I know you could talk about it from your perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kick us off. And just to give a little more context to what you said, Eric, when I was at the university that I worked at, they told me that less than 1% of all employees use that free tuition. Now, this is not a reimbursement. This was 100% free tuition, prepaid. And that was definitely a motivating factor for me to stay at that university for 7 years, to get free education, because I just thought it was so great of a benefit. But then also shame on me if I didn't take advantage of that, because it was there for me to take advantage of. But you're absolutely right. And so maybe what we can do is maybe look at how we frame it. So with a lifelong learning, and this is a little bit of a I think a hot button, is it the person, the individual, that drives their own professional development, or should it be the organization that drives that professional development for the individual?
Well, yes, both. I think it's definitely both. I think you have to have the individual who wants to pursue different, if it's personal or professional development. But I think it's the organization, and then really the leadership. So their direct, the direct manager or supervisor, who really needs to make sure that the framework's set for that. Like, you have to have a platform for them to grow, and you have to have some way to kind of check for that growth is actually happening too. And so if you're instance, like, I want to learn how to program, great. I know my manager would support me in that, maybe take a class or two, attend webinars, whatever it is. And then, but the expectation is after a certain amount of months, like let's check in, let's talk about this. Okay, how's this journey going? Is that good? And then I know that there's a lot of support. So a lot of the organization has to support the individual. So whatever path they want to go on, sometimes it's within, something that's within the confines of the organization that you can pursue. Like, if you want to get an MBA, if they have that, okay, great, let's work to that. Or it could be just, if you want to get stronger at e-learning, great, here's some tools, here's some resources, and let's nurture this. And then maybe if it's, you want to, if I want to become a veterinarian, so great, how can my organization help me, and what are some things, and that kind of thing. And so I think it's up to the organization to really set the framework for how the learners want to get, and it really ignites that flame of lifelong learning in the individual. So
I love it. And if I can, just for like the replay, I want to highlight what some folks have said here in the
Mm-hmm.
chat. Then I'm going to riff off what you just said there, Eric. So Jennifer said, when she thinks of lifelong learners, she sees a person who not only engages in learning for themselves, but also engages for others. And I really love that. Their peers, their mentees, their manager in learning with them, and they make it a social. And I just think that is really important. Lita says that in her organization, she loves that they get to speak into things that will benefit the organization, and there's space for them to try new things that require them to learn and apply new things. So you made me think of something, Eric, when you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about, kind of the organization providing those opportunities. What if it's something, let's just use Starbucks, for example. So Starbucks has a program that they provide, I think, tuition reimbursement to Arizona State University, I believe, because it's an online program
Mm-hmm.
for their baristas and folks that work there. They're probably not getting something related to the business. So what are kind of your thoughts on them learning basically a new career on the kind of time and efforts of that particular organization? So let's go into your veterinarian example. Let's say that a
Mm-hmm.
barista at Starbucks does want to become a veterinarian and uses that tuition at Starbucks to do that. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
I think, if we look at those types of jobs, first, I think a lot of those jobs are going to be like entry level, and so it's a lot of individuals, think about like I've worked with like call center, and so a lot of these individuals, it's entry level positions, and so for your example, like if you want to be a veterinarian, or if you want to pursue something that's outside of the organization, I still think that the organization has to kind of foster that and really want to support the individual. I mean, if you either care about the individual, or you're going to provide, and you can provide resources and opportunity, or you're not going to develop that, nurture that. And I have seen different organizations. They have, like, if you wanted to pursue um, like college credits, it's usually tracked in a specific thing. Either we'll pay for your PMP certification or an MBA, and that's it. That's all you're going to. And I think that's, again, that's great, but I think that's also going to reflect, you're going to get that, 1%, 2% of people are actually going to take advantage of that. So, but I do believe that organizations, if they want to care and they really want to put their employees first, they're going to help their employees uh, live their dreams and achieve those things. So they're not going to be a barista forever, right? That's just, you're not going to do that. So how can we support you? And then, they can always throw in stipulations like, okay, once you've achieved this, you have to, continue to work, like you said, with higher ed, like you have to continue to work for us for, another year or 5, 6 months or something like that, just so it kind of gets a little more out of you. But at the end of the day, like, a good organization that wants to create this culture has to be comfortable letting people go, and they're going to return if you treat people nicely and very and professionally, and you support them. They're going to want to come back. If they, depending on the field. Obviously, I don't think Starbucks is going to start a veterinarian clinic anytime soon, but you never know. Cats and coffee could be the next thing.
I know my cat loved the whipped cream off of Frappuccino, so I mean, it
There you
definitely
go.
could be a thing. But yeah, I actually love another point that you made there about kind of, if we give you this employee, you have to stay X amount of time. And to
Mm-hmm.
your point, if they're treated well, if they're happy, and folks are also saying it here in the chat, Lita just said it too. If people are happy, then they're going to be, more apt to stay. What's interesting about my particular situation is I had no kind of barrier at all. My only barrier was I just had to finish the academic semester. And then
Mm-hmm.
after the end of the academic semester, there were no strings attached. So I actually left the university yesterday after getting almost $85,000 worth of free tuition. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to stay any longer. And
Mm-hmm.
and to your point, I mean, you do want to kind of grow people and get them out there, but you do see a lot of these companies saying, if you do this, you need to stay for 2 years or 3 years. So do you think that that might potentially be a barrier for people as to maybe why they don't take advantage of that, because they think, oh goodness, I don't know if I can last another 2 to 3 years at this place?
That's a good question. It's almost a case by case thing. They have to, the organization again, it comes down to like what type of culture you're trying to create. If you're going to create a good employee relationship and people can grow and they're lifelong learner, and then maybe don't add a big stipulation on it, like, okay, it'll still work with us for 5 more years. I know with education, you can get like the teach grant, right? And so you can get your master's, essentially a large portion of your master's covered under the teach grant, but you have to work in like a certain school. I forget the specific requirements for it, but you have to work within type of school that tends to be like low socioeconomic school district, and you have to do it for a lengthy period of time. And so, if you want to go into education, I guess it's a little bit different because you want to be a teacher, so you're going to kind of work there, get your master's covered, and then either move on or do what you need to. But I mean, it can be a barrier. I definitely could see that it could stop people. I would love to see more critical data, and okay, out of that the 1% who took it, why did they take it? And then the 99% who didn't take it, what's stopping you from doing it? And what is the most common things, and see how we can kind of get around those things. I think, again, shorter stipulations would probably be easier for organizations to work with, 6 months to a year. I think tacking on multiple years, I think it definitely gonna kind of take the wind out of people's sails when they want to pursue this education, because not only are this education is probably going to take them longer because they're working full time plus doing night school. So they're probably going to tack on 2 plus 3, 4 years, and then on top of that, another 2 or 3 years. And if it's an unrelated field, or there's no position within the organization for it, I can see it being a kind of a drawback for some people.
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head again, because I think that when you take on a formal education endeavor, it takes a lot of time away from those other things. So if you're working full time, if you have a family, if you have kind of these other obligations, it is very difficult. And if there's any silver lining about what's going on, I really think it's really challenging that traditional higher education brick and mortar model right
Mm-hmm.
now, which I think is wonderful, because I think that the reason why so many of these online universities and programs are popular even before this hit is because they work with people. They realize
Mm-hmm.
that humans have other things to do in that typical 7 to 4 or 8 to 5 time frame, and a lot of people do have to work. And I feel like traditional higher education institutions, a lot of them forgot the adult. They really just wanted to cater to that 18 to 24-year-old demographic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
made it very difficult for adults, working professionals, to really take advantage of those. So I do think that that is a big, hopefully, disruptor, if there's going to be a
Right.
disruptor from that. But no, I do think that you have something there with that, because I do think that there is kind of those parameters where people just don't have that extra time after they finish their workday to devote to bettering themselves, sadly. And it is a very kind of selfish journey when you go on an educational endeavor. And I know I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have done what I've done without the support of my family and my partner. Like, if he wouldn't have kept the house moving, like, I don't think I could have done all the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that I done.
Right.
So I do want to highlight real quick a couple of the comments, and then we'll go ahead and hop over to your next question. So I love when
Sure.
Anthony was talking about, we were talking about like the Starbucks example, that, he said turnover in that industry is relatively high. So supporting educational efforts for 2 years or more will instill and beat that normal turnover and attrition rate. And I completely agree. I think that definitely could elevate particular organizations. I think that was a really great comment from him.
Yeah.
All right. Jennifer, this is an interesting one. So, Jennifer says, sadly, so many resume screening softwares will ding people out who do not have letters behind their name, even if they have their years of experience and other non-traditional learning experiences. And Jennifer, absolutely. Not to put him on the spot because I know he's here, but Joe Suarez, I know, is going to be talking a little bit about kind of job hunting and his methods on Thursday. And I do think that he may be speaking about that. So
Nice.
stay tuned. All right. You want to go ahead and go to your next kind of guiding question? And again, open invitation. If
Yep.
someone is here, wants to hop in with us, please. We don't need to be the talking heads. We're happy to have other people come in and give their insight. So if you want in on the discussion today, just let me know in the chat and I'll invite you in.
Yeah. Love to hear from you. Different perspectives. Even if you just want to talk about what your organization does, so we can get the touch and feel of what that culture actually looks like. So my next question here, kind of throw it out here. Really, how do L&D folk help with building this culture? And so this kind of is multiple kind of questions out of this one, but who owns this? So if you look at different research and different things, I think we have a pretty good understanding. But who owns this? How do we as L&D folk help? And then also the individual contributor, right? So in my last role and even this role, I'm still an individual contributor. I don't manage anyone in a typical sense. I'm not a supervisor. So how can we contribute to that culture? How can we coach up and coach with our peers, and how do we when we're building training and we're building content, how do we plan for lifelong learning? Is that part of our framework too? So I know it's a lot of questions in one, but just kind of it kind of all connects together. So
Yeah, I'm going to hit on what Luis actually just said, that he worked for two organizations that paid for the LinkedIn/Lynda enterprise memberships, and he still has access to those. I'd love to know what people's kind of thoughts about those models are anyway. I think they're kind of like the good old e-learning modules where you can just hit next and get your certificate of completion. I don't find them very engaging at all. I think they're good for just like a little content dump, but for me to actually practice and master and grow, it doesn't work for me. And that's, again, my own personal opinion, but I'd love to know how others kind of think about that, because I have heard people say, oh yeah, well, at my organization, we have LinkedIn Learning and that's our strategy. And it's like, well, is it really a strategy though? Or is it just kind of content?
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole reason I want to ask this, because again, are you just providing this one benefit? How does it actually mean that the culture's there? How do we know that? How do you say like we've established a lifelong learning culture because we provide LinkedIn Learning? Like that's an example of like a benefit. That doesn't mean that you're nurturing that. I think for me, while people are commenting in, I used Lynda to learn Illustrator and Photoshop. And so that was more of a hands-on kind of, I put a thing on there and I downloaded the source files and I followed along with it. So I found some value, and that some of the stuff that is more critical thinking, more, I guess, you have to think about what you're doing. Like I think I've seen a couple of things on like instructional design and that kind of thing. Again, I think you got to experience and practice stuff to really learn from it. This provides you with, like you said, here's a little bit of content. At the end of it, you might get a certificate printed out and you can hang on your wall. But it's definitely, sometimes I think it misses the mark completely.
I'm sharing a link in the chat to my all-time favorite video from Anna Sabranowitz, and I'm so sorry I'm butchering your last name. I will get it one of these days. But in that video, she talks about the importance of feedback and what it actually means to be a professional. And just your TLDR version of it is she talks about going to get her hair cut, and there's kind of these three levels of getting your hair cut. One's like an apprentice, and one is like a master hair cutter, and you have to pay more to get the master. And so she pays to get the master person to cut her hair, having a conversation and saying, so what makes you a master? And she's like, oh, well, I've been doing it for 20 years. And she kind of goes a little bit further. Okay, so, but 20 years, like what have you done? Oh, well, I've just cut hair for 20 years. And so basically the purpose of that video is duration does not equal mastery. Just because you've been doing something for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you're not getting feedback, that doesn't make you a master. It makes you kind of a minor bird. You're just kind of repeating and doing the same thing over and over again. And I love that video so much. I've shared it, much to my detriment sometimes with people, but I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. I think DJ's comment here, the roadblocks is professional development is not factored in for time. So you have for a lot of these entry level positions, you have 40 hours, right? Let's not talk about overtime or anything. And so typically, especially like I said, I've experienced with call center. I mean, they're tied to their phones, or they're tied to a computer, and Every moment is tracked. So besides a new training that has to come in because there's a system update, what opportunities is it the organization going to give these people for professional development? Oh, you want to learn, these skill sets? Great. Let's talk about, how to communicate more effectively, writing, professionalism, or, Microsoft Office suite. Here we can learn more technical skills around that. Or you want to hop into IT, how much career exploration is done, which is, I think, a really critical part of lifelong learning. So it's a good point, DJ. I really like that.
Yeah, and Taruna's in the house. She always has great insights. And she says, I find that lifelong learning does better when it's self-initiated and it's a continuous endeavor. And it's not about only enrolling in courses and formal certifications. And then our motivations for formal learning can be quite different from our motivation to learn in general. And I completely agree. So clap for you, Taruna. Love it.
Yeah, definitely. It has to be self-initiated. And then again, you should have an organization that's going to support that. Again, that comes down to having that framework in place that that allows for, gives time for, either professional. It could be, formal classes. It could be, LinkedIn. It could be anything, or joining a chat, with us two and hanging out and just having a good dialogue, which is probably the best experience, that I found is joining these chats and just either on Twitter or on here, and that's where I think real growth is really achieved.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for my L&D family tree and them challenging me, growing me, and really engaging with me has been really developmental for me. And I feel like once I took my own kind of professional development seriously in the sense of getting on those platforms and seeking out those people, it's really helped me kind of pivot and grow. And that's always like my number one piece of advice if somebody's like, I want to get into instructional design. I'm like, follow these people and engage with them, period. That's how you get started. Go ahead and start growing your network out because there's just absolutely no way to know every single thing about
Right.
what the breadth of L&D does. So having those people in your network that you can lean on or ask for somebody to look at your storyline file or have them like look at your Camtasia or whatever it is that you're doing is so critical. And, your employer might not know that somebody helped you out, wink, wink, but, I think it's very powerful to say, working with me, it's not just me, but you also get my network. I think that's a very powerful statement that you can give somebody.
Right. Definitely.
All right. You want to go to our next one?
Yeah. I think it comes down to, so who owns this? Who owns this culture? As like I said, as L&D folk, is it like, I know a lot of people said the individual, and I think Alexa said they don't depend on the employer for professional development. Does their own. So I think that's really critical with that. You have to kind of have that motivation, but I think there's a lot of people who are not really sure where they want to go and can have some more guidance. And I think that I'm a firm believer, and I kind of talk about like with paychecks in specific, from the CEO down. I truly believe that we live in a learning culture. So when I was doing research about this and looking at it, then looking, reflecting on my own organization, I was like, okay, yeah, I see how from leadership down, they're the ones that really own it and they're driving it and they're providing opportunities and they're discussing. I mean, training is critical to us. We have sales and service, so we're constantly training, we're constantly developing. We have a lot of professional development, and we allow people to take professional development time with a variety of topics. We have career pathing set too, which I think is, when I was doing the research, I saw that career pathing and career exploration are critical things to having a lifelong learning culture established at your organization. Is people got to know where they want to go, and they got to have clear roadmap. Okay, you want to be a supervisor? Great. Let's talk about what you could do. You take a couple of this. You have these experiences. You learn how to coach, and then you have hopefully opportunities arise, and you can kind of pursue that. Oh, you want to go into accounting or something that takes a college level kind of degree to achieve. Great. Well, here's how we can support you in that endeavor as well. I think organizations that are large enough that have a lot of those maps and kind of it's branched out properly definitely could take advantage of college tuition kind of reimbursement and kind of and help kind of grow people within their organization. Again, these people are going to be happy. They're going to be satisfied. They're learning. They're growing. They're seeing seeing the results of their own efforts, right? Come to life in front of them. And I think that's really important. And so, I want to see what other people might have to say. And if you want to talk about who owns it at higher ed, when it comes to employees.
It's very complicated. So in higher ed, at least in my experience, there's kind of this dichotomy between the faculty and the staff. So staff have a different kind of ethos, if you will, of what's expected of them, what they can do, whatever. And then staff, it's like they have their own kind of ethos and what's expected of them. So those two worlds they live in two different silos. And so I think it's really difficult to roll out kind of organizational like compliance or whatever, because there's just kind of these different set of rules for who plays the game when, which is interesting. But I'm curious if I can, Eric, I just want to know, because I think this is also a key part of answering your question. In the chat, do you all mind to tell kind of where L&D sits in your organization? Because I just left a job where I was in IT, but I'm going to a job where I'm part of operations. And I know I've had friends that's been in the HR. Yes, Jennifer. Piece, JROC's in quality operations. I wonder if there's something to where the L&D sits to where L&D influences and has that ownership.
Yeah, that's a good connection. For us, it's under HR. We technically have an umbrella, HROD, organizational development. So it's kind of a little bit of a big umbrella that has L&D and then leadership development too, as well as part of that.
Yeah. Looks like a lot of ops. So I got to hit you ops people up. I've never been in the ops side. When I was at Amazon, we had our own bucket. We were actually a learning bucket, but I was in customer service. If you all haven't seen JROC's social distance hair, it is quite a sight. Yeah, I did too, Luis. I figured there would be a lot of HR too. So I'm glad I asked that question. See, we're learning something together today. As you're doing that, Jarek, I'm going to read Roger's comment here because I think it's interesting. He says, HR isn't an official learning development organization, but I'm in customer support and we have a group in member education. And there are a couple of people in sales that develop internal courses. So there may be others, but I don't know that since we're a global company. So maybe there might be a little bit of L&D sprinkled in throughout other departments. I mean, I think that's pretty common too.
Yeah.
I think where it sits really impacts the focus, though, on learning. Like being in quality, my stuff is mainly about compliance. Like we are legally required to train somebody on this in this way or this way or this way. And can you prove that happened? And so I don't have problems with like being Netflix of learning or LinkedIn learning because, people are in a learning management system. I assign them their compliance training and they have to do it or they get overdue and their boss gets mad at them. So it's not on their volition. They just have to do it. So most of my thrust is how do I take this dry, dusty compliance stuff that they have to take anyway? How do I get them through it quicker? How do I make sure they understand it better, make it more memorable? Sometimes more fun. I know fun is an F word these days in learning and development, but that's my game is how do I roll this out so that I can prove that they had the training they needed and also make it not too painful and make it effective? If I was in operations, it wouldn't be so much cover your butt and maybe someone else can jump in who's from operations. But it seems to me like the thrust of the learning would be how do we increase performance? How do we give them the tools that'll make them quicker at their job, safer at their job, faster at their job? How do we get more widgets for less money? Using training to impact performance, which is kind of stuff I keep pushing into, but I kind of feel the boundaries of my role as, well, you're the compliance guy. And then for higher ed, I got no clue. That's why I'm glad we got you guys here.
I went ahead and popped in John Kissinger too, and I know he's had a big L&D career at Domino's. So do you want to pipe in on this? You're fine. Do you want to go ahead and share maybe your perspectives on kind of the lifelong learning, and introduce who you are? I don't think a lot of our folks know who you are. You've been gone for a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've come to hang out with you guys. My name's John Kissinger. I am a learning strategist by day, voice actor by night, though I spend more of my time voice acting these days. But I spent 25-ish years as first a trainer and facilitator, then an instructional designer, manager, director of training departments, and so forth, primarily at Domino's Pizza, where I spent most of my career, and then later in a kind of boutique experiential marketing and learning agency. I'm based out of the Detroit area in Michigan. So is that enough of a bio?
Sounds good. So what are your thoughts on this lifelong learning?
Well, some of you've probably heard me say it before, though maybe I don't say it often enough. For all of us anyway, who deem ourselves as learning professionals, I'm fanatical about the fact that you need to be a professional learner first, that you have to be relentless in your pursuit of upping your game, learning more, enhancing your skills, because that's behavior we're trying to model for everyone who attends our courses, takes our classes, participates in our e-learning and so forth, right? So if we can't do it, if we think we've made it, A, we haven't, and B, why should anyone else kind of follow our lead? So that's just sort of for us, but for organizations, I think the same rules apply. I know most recently working for an agency supporting automotive and creating solutions for them, that some of the owner partners of said agency kind of aren't really interested in evolving what they're doing. And now the agency's been completely hobbled by putting all their eggs in one basket and not being prepared for the new world order, this sort of virtual world we've suddenly found ourselves in. So they've had to furlough innumerable employees, and they're kind of waiting for the auto manufacturers to start back up instead of being equipped to go after new kinds of business for other folks who have a need to stay in business, maybe non-manufacturing and that kind of stuff, because they have no ability to pivot because they didn't sharpen the saw when they most needed to, and they didn't diversify their skills or client base.
Wow. I mean, I think that's a lesson to all of us, and I think it's really important to kind of hear these stories and elevate them. So, if I can ask, John, how is everything going for you personally through kind of everything going on? I know the Detroit area has been hit pretty hard. How are you holding up? Kind of how's business going, and what are kind of some of the steps that you've taken to make sure that you're doing okay?
Yeah, well, the fact that I do VO is what's kept me afloat. If I was just kind of a full-time learning experience designer working for the agency I've been working for, I'd be SOL, because I, along with 70% of the organization, was furloughed on March 27th. So I have, for the first time in my adult life, had to start collecting unemployment checks, which is the weirdest sort of experience. And if it wasn't for the sort of government kick in on a weekly basis, I'd be in a world of pain. Now, as I said, most of what I'm doing is voice acting, and that was kind of supplemental. But if the roles were reversed, it'd be pretty stinky times for me right now. And right now I'm on this fence of, okay, do I continue to push forward and just go VO full time, or do I start changing my resume up to reflect sort of a refocus on learning solutions or experiential design or customer experience consulting or whatever? Right now, I'm kind of in that wait and see mode where it's like, I'm going to continue to push my VO business and nurture that and help that grow. But I'm going to ride it out a little bit longer in terms of doing any learning consulting. And you might ask, like, why do both? Why not just do the one? it's because I can't leave well enough alone. I've been in the learning space so long that I love it. So it's really the reason why I primarily do voice acting for learning solutions, e-learning, whiteboard videos, training videos, because it's the world I love, you know? So anyway, I'm doing okay, but would be doing a lot worse if I didn't already start down the path of starting a different business, you know?
I mean, right there, if you're on the fence about being a lifelong learner, hopefully he epitomized the reasons why you want to be. So thank you for sharing that, John. I mean, that's very vulnerable of you to get on here and share that. Certainly didn't mean for that to come out, but I think it was really powerful. So thank you for sharing that story. Yeah. Wow. We'll go ahead and hop to Godinez's question here. And his question is, how do you deal with those who may not want to be lifelong learners and are content with knowing just enough to get by? They're not bad, but they just have no want for it. And if I may, I'll just kick this one off and be very brief. I worked for somebody like that a couple years ago, and it was definitely, I lasted 9 months working for that person. I don't know how I lasted 9 months. I don't know why, but it just got to a point that it was absolutely it was a deal breaker for me, and I just could not work for that person anymore, for other reasons too. But I knew that the way that we were doing it was not the way that was going to continue to grow and innovate, and that wasn't the right fit for me. So I just basically went and said, I don't want to work for this person anymore. I'm prepared to walk away. And they didn't let me walk away. They found me another role. But yeah, it's very difficult, especially I feel like if there's a power dynamic there, if it's somebody that's more tenured or seniored with the organization, that's always a difficult conversation, especially if you are in age younger than that person. Sometimes you're told, shut up, millennial, or, you know, try to put you in your place, that kind of thing. It's very difficult. And I don't really know a good way of handling it. I wish there was a better way and scenario in that for me, but unfortunately, that's just the way it was. But it ended up working out. I worked for actually a great person after that, and yeah, it worked out fine. So Eric or John, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's really difficult. It almost brings me back to like when I was a teacher, and you have some students that just don't want to do anything. And, you know, you could threaten them, you could do that. But I really believe that, you know, you got to find the right thing. I think if it's someone like it could be a peer, or it could be someone who reports to you, or, you know, in your case, I mean, you report to, whatever it is, you got to find kind of what their motivation is and try to tap into that. And so some people are truly just content on just doing the bare minimum, or the whatever it is, and they could be excellent at it. You know, they've been doing it for 15 years and they just want to do that, and that's the end of it. And great. So how do, you know, again, if, you know, how can we empower them? You know, can we learn something from them? Can they help them and leverage those skills and you know, you leverage their strengths really, and kind of teach other people, or that kind of thing, and try to find that middle ground, and you know, hopefully you can ignite that spark. Because I don't believe that, you know, it gets down to like almost like a theoretical discussion. I believe we're all lifelong learners because we're human and we're always learning. Like, we have to adapt and grow, or we're not going to survive. And so I think, you know, at the base of it, we're always going to learn. It's just trying to connect. Okay, what do we want to learn about? What are we passionate about? And so being able to have that kind of conversation could help nurture a better relationship with that individual, and get them a little more motivated to try different things, do a little bit of different things. So that's kind of just my take on it.
Oh, I think that's a great way. Just latching on to that phrase that you said, what are you passionate about? If we can find ways in our profession to draw that out of people, or help them reconnect to it, but connect the dots back to kind of not just their personal emotional needs, but how that maps against the organizational needs, that's going to help them accelerate their career trajectory. I mean, everyone that I've seen skyrocket in their careers, in some cases even jump past me, was because they couldn't have been more passionate about learning as much as they could, to grow to that next level. Now, some people, sure, they climb the corporate ladder to make that, to get a better status title or make more money or whatever. But it's hard to actually get there if you're not passionately making that extra investment in time and relationship building and skill building. And, it's funny. So much of the old adage about how it's not what you know, it's who you know. Make no mistake, the who you know doesn't just happen by accident. It happens because people are cultivating relationships. They're learning how to network in and who the power players are, whom has the ability to mentor them or help them develop the skills that they need to be successful at that next level. I've just never not seen it happen that way, other than the occasional just sort of raw political, we like this person better than they look like they fit the mold better, but that's not the most common thing. It's often blamed for being the most common thing because it's an easy scapegoat when you haven't done the work you need to do to earn that promotion. But I think passion is key to all of it in many respects. If you're not emotionally engaged, A, you're not learning, B, you're not working to your peak potential, you're probably adding limited value to the organization, all of that. So
if I may be a little bit vulnerable, just to kind of back up what John said, when I worked for that individual that I talked about, it really was kind of a low point in my career. I felt like I didn't maybe have the skills and capability to do anything. I felt very beaten down by that person. And I actually made a conscious decision that time. I could either sit and cry about it, or I could use it as fuel to get to my next level of my career. And so that's what I ended up doing. So I knew I wasn't going to get those experiences of managing a budget or managing a project at that particular organization at that time, but I knew I could get it through being in a local ATD chapter, by volunteering to run the conference. I knew I could get it by, trying to host a meeting of, things at the local ATD chapter, or I got involved with Toastmasters so I could run for office and, have that leadership experience on my resume. I looked for those stretch assignments outside of my organization because I knew they weren't going to give me those particular opportunities because of the various politics and that kind of stuff. So I was, to John's point, I was hungry and I wanted it. And I knew I wanted to get to a director level position soon, but I knew I didn't have the chops on my resume. So I went outside, and it did take more time away from my family, took more time away from my graduate studies, but I'm sitting now getting ready to be a director, and gosh darn it, I'm really glad I took the time to do that. So if you're not getting what you need in your organization, look outside, because there's a ton of opportunities out there for you to take it.
Your hunger is palpable, Cara. I mean, for those of us who've kind of followed your journey for some time, the degree to which you're involved in all kinds, TLDC here, right? That's an example. You've enriched your own understanding of the discipline by joining this community, but not just to get, but to give, right? We all have something we can share, and in sharing, we benefit, we build relationships, we get our name out there. We all of a sudden, we find ourselves as conference presenters, expanding our network, elevating, in some cases, the people that we're connecting with, right? Once you start getting out there on the circuit, attending and presenting at conferences, you're meeting people who are luminaries in the discipline and learning now from the best of the best. And your journey is just an absolute testament to that.
No, I'm just Cara. I'm just trying to help you all think about it, as I don't want anyone to go through the crap that I went through. So that's just kind of my 2 cents. And then the other thing too is to get a mentor. And I know that that's a very difficult conversation to have with somebody, but I reached out to a CLO who I admired and actually met through the TLDC realm. And I just sent him a LinkedIn message, and I said, hey, I know you probably don't even know who I am, but I'd love to have 5-10 minutes of your time, because I'd like to be a CLO like you. And almost immediately got time on their calendar, and that person has been mentoring me and including me in other conversations where, again, to your point, John, I'm in a Zoom call with like people that like I've read their crap for, well, okay, not crap. I've read their stuff
We
for
know
years.
you meant crap in the colloquial sense.
Yes, totally. And so, I was totally like having a little fangirl moment there, but I was like, wow, like I have a seat at the table now. Like, look at all these people I'm with. So I do think it's really critical. And if you feel stuck and if you feel like you can't make it, open invitation. If I can reach out to me, I'm happy to help guide you any way that I can, because so many people helped me get to where I am today. And I think it's the right thing to continue to pay for. And that goes for, I think, the broad community. At least all of us here at TLDC, I feel like we are definitely open and we definitely want to help grow other people. So yeah, but you all so sweet. You didn't have everybody in the chat's too nice. Gaudenus, what a question. Way to be all philosophical there. Appreciate it. We have 5 minutes left. So Eric, I'll start with you. What are kind of maybe a few action items people can take from this conversation? Big fan of kind of like this 30, 60, 90 plan of like, if you really want to kind of grow and own this, what are kind of the next steps? We'll start with you and then I'll kick it over to John.
Sure. I think, like I said, in the beginning of this, it was, I think we're all really passionate about learning. And so how do we bring that to the rest of the organization? And so I think the first thing you want to do is really feel, okay, do we have a lifelong learning? Is learning really part of the organization? Or is it just, we need to do the bare minimum so people don't mess up the job and we can, sell units or provide some, base standard of customer service. But again, if you want to create a culture, what's really missing? And then I would, do some research personally as individual contributors, or work with your manager and, kind of coach up. Okay, here's a good framework for a learning culture, and these are the benefits. I mean, the benefits are massive. Just people want to learn. You can really tap into like continuous learning, agile learning. There's a whole bunch of learning that can really come of this. And so it really begins with having those conversations. With your direct peers, with your managers and leadership, and you have to get leadership buy-in, and they have to support this drive. It has to be important to them, and they have to see the value of making it important for the individual. And then, okay, we can allocate resources, we can allocate time to grow our people and provide them opportunities. And here's some career mapping opportunities. Here's some career exploration. And so it really starts with having those conversations, doing a little bit of research, and again, sharing your passion that we've talked about. And passion is probably the key thing here, is how do we ignite that in others as well.
Love it. Go ahead, John.
Two ways to skin this cat. One kind of organizationally, one individually. Individually, kind of, I think we've maybe beat that horse to death. Be relentless, be passionate, get after it, find the people, the sources, the whatever. As a voice actor, a lot of people don't know that even voice actors do a lot of coaching classes each year in different genres of voice acting, acting classes, improv classes, all kinds of stuff. They invest in order to be better, because you got to be at the top of your game to continue to get work and better and higher paying jobs. Not so different than an individual in an organization, right? Can you find that can mentor you in the areas that you need to develop most? Who can help you build on your strengths and find a way to market that within the organization? But beyond the individual level, if you really want to take your learning, training, performance function within the organization and help elevate it to do better work, to get more budget and so forth, you really need to find an advocate or a sponsor. And I would tell you, don't seek it necessarily in the HR department unless the HR department is super, super duper prominent in your organization. If you can find sponsors in operations, or even better, marketing, even though, well, how does my training stuff map against marketing, right? Well, at some point, that marketing has to turn into execution of whatever promise the marketing is making, which then leads back to operations. If you can find sponsors and advocates and develop relationships in both marketing and operations, you'll start to get to the ear of people in the C-suite. And it's only when your message reaches that level that learning and development is truly going to thrive, because the leaders of the organization have to be passionate about learning themselves. And if they don't really see the value, if it's just a compliance thing, your function's never going to grow and it's never going to reach its full potential.
All right, here it comes. Ready? Ready? Mic drop. Mic drop. That was great. All right, I can't believe it's like end of our time. It's crazy. It's went by so quickly. Eric, thank you so much for bringing this topic in. Yeah, Mike Tilt. I like that, Joe Wyndham. That's a little bit better because I actually did drop it on Saturday,
Yeah, you don't
and
want to
then
drop
now
a
I'm
mic.
yeah, now I'm like worried that I need a new Yeti, so it's not good. Eric, John, where can people connect with you and find you to continue this conversation?
Yeah, I'll post my LinkedIn.
That's my website. If you got questions, you can reach out to me here.
Perfect. Hit John up for any voiceover stuff that you all need.
Be happy to
it's
help.
fantastic.
You,
yes. And again, thank you for being so vulnerable again today. I still have chills from your story. And again, what a great topic. Tune back in, same time, same place, Thursday. Joseph Yosefe Suarez will be your host, talking about jobs and how to find jobs when you're kind of in this bucket and maybe you're looking for your next role from everything going on. So again, thank you all for being part of TLD Cast today. Cara North signing off. Have a great Tuesday, everybody. Thank you again so much for being here.